where we give a hard time to people who need to be given a hard time, just like Socrates' horse. And I'm doing a live recording. That is to say, we're live right now. I'm talking to Michael Foster, who is a writer at itsgoodtobeaman.com. He's a father of many beautiful children, and he's a pastor as well. And he's got a lot of opinions on a topic that has been catching my attention lately, which is these questions of red pill masculinity. And there's probably a lot we can talk about. I do want to start out by giving you an update on some of the issues that are going on in Texas, because we have broadcast there a couple times. Right now, we are in the fight of our life to defend masculine and feminine roles in Texas, because they're through the schools and through family court and through a lot of other institutions, they are pushing really hard the transgender ideology. And right now there are various bills that we have been able to convince legislators to propose in both the House and the Senate. And the key person there is Representative Stephanie Klick. I've put her number up there. She's going to be hearing testimony on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, Wednesday, April 14th. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to get these bills passed. They're going to ban social transitioning among minors, pediatric gender transitioning, that is. And we're hoping that we can mount public pressure for Governor Abbott to sign these bills. But all of that aside, let's talk to Michael Foster about this issue about it's good to be a man. First of all, Michael, do you feel that transgenderism is a symptom, or is it a major driver behind what I perceive as the crisis in masculinity? How do you fit this in with the map of all the things you're dealing with? Because you're out there, I've seen your work, and you're really trying to encourage Christian men, basically, right? To embrace what it is to be a man and to cultivate a healthy manhood. How do you fit transgenderism and that controversy in with your discussions?
Sure. Transgenderism is a doctrine of hate and shame. It teaches men, biological men, to be ashamed of their God-assigned sex, and women as well, right? They feel like there's something wrong with their nature, and they have to somehow correct it to get attention, to get love, right, to be accepted, or whatever. They feel ashamed of something that's their nature. That's not good. Shame is wonderful when you feel ashamed of doing bad things, but being what you are biologically, ontologically, is not something you should ever feel ashamed of, right? And so transgenderism, it's, the left always calls something the opposite of what it is, right? And transgenderism isn't love; it's hatred. It's participating in someone's deep self-hatred and shame. And so one reason we started our podcast and called it "It's Good to Be a Man" is that we wanted to focus on the goodness of God's created order, God's design. Obviously, it's good to be a woman. That's true as well. If God assigned to you a female sex at conception, right, according to his will, then it's good to be a woman. If he did the same thing for a man, it's good to be a man. It's part of his good design, and we don't want to hate it or reject it or feel ashamed of it or anything like that. So transgenderism is kind of the spirit of the age ramped up to its most logical conclusion, which is that binary sexuality is not true. Actually, it's fluid, or a spectrum, right?
Right. Well, you know what? Let me just jump right into it. I got on TikTok recently because I got shut out, or I shut down Twitter, Facebook, all the other social media. And one of my friends told me to get on TikTok. She said, "Oh, you'll have a really great time on there." I got on there, and within a couple hours, I was just bombarded with nothing but Christian dating advice. And I was surprised, Michael, because I thought that I would basically just be someone who can't stand feminism, and I still can't stand feminism, but I thought that I would find refuge in Christian conservative voices on dating. And especially people who bill themselves that way, who say, "I'm an anti-feminist conservative Christian." But I found that a lot of what both the men and the women were saying in the Christian conservative community were just as problematic as the feminists. I found that a lot of the women are reacting against feminism by saying that they're going to be a stay-at-home mom, but then they expect that their husband is going to make above a certain income, and they kind of have an attitude about it. You get the feeling like if his income falls below that, or if he gets sick or there's an injury, they're not going to have a problem basically kicking him to the curb and then taking him, because that's a lot of what the discussion is about being divorced, being a divorced mom, and all of the things with family court. So it seems like a lot of these people who label themselves as conservative Christian, anti-feminist women, and we'll get to the men in a second because they're a problem too, but a lot of them, it seems as though they are not different from the feminists. They believe that as a woman, they are entitled to men's stuff. And when there are any signs that men aren't happy with just being a subordinate, disposable role in their picture of their life, they immediately turn full-blown feminists. They go on the mommy blogs and they complain night and day about how their husbands don't do enough. And there are even some blogs where I found women who were saying, well, look, I know he's working all day, but when he comes home, he has to be on duty so I can take a break from everything I've done during the day. And there was no sense that she even wanted to give her husband any rest, and then I look down the line and I see these are some of the same women who in their 50s are going to be like, I'm divorced and now I'm a cougar and now I'm going after young guys. It's like this full cycle of dysfunction. Am I reading this correctly, or what are you seeing when you look at the Christian conservative anti-feminist labels for a lot of the female Christian bloggers? Is it just me, or does there seem to be
No, you're tracking.
Really?
Look,
Okay.
This generation of women is being destroyed by vanity. They're just being absolutely gutted, and pastors are cowards without spines that won't say something, because it's much easier to deal with an upset man than an upset woman. With the least upset man, you just fight and it's over with. But that's not how it works with a woman. So what you have is women who are constantly being praised and flattered over and over and over and over and over again, right? And that's not good for anyone, regardless of your sex. But Paul is very specific when he warns women about their vanity and emphasizes the importance of inward spiritual beauty. And same thing in the book of Proverbs. Look, don't trust in your beauty. When women are young, they're very beautiful. And now you can actually just be very unhealthy, very obese, and you post a picture on Instagram, and all these thirsty guys that are looking for female validation are going to say, oh, you're so lovely, you're so beautiful, whatever. And then some guy that really is like a good catch for you, kind of within your reach, you're going to say, oh, I don't think that guy is worthy of me. I mean, all these guys online, and there could be a happy marriage there, right? There could be real wonderful years spent together before you both enter into eternity, which is a vapor away, right? That could be there, but these women are being told that all these men are below them. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and some like real weak studies on this, but more or less, men are much more flexible in what they find attractive. Right. Women, not so much right now. At least right now, they're being conditioned to think that they all deserve like a top 20% guy. And I hate to think about it in that I don't want to I don't subscribe to those categories personally, but people do right now, right? A woman thinks they're going to get this guy that's like top tier, and they're not. And this is what kind of started It's Good to Be a Man, is I saw these guys that some of them were handsome, tall, had together, and they're dating these girls that I saw, and I'm like, man, like you're all right, but you're not all that. And these girls are like passing on these guys. I'm like, this guy is a doctor and he can play music and he's handsome and he's a leader in the church and he fears God, and you kind of look like a dude, and and you're passing on him. And I was trying to figure out what is going on, right? Because I'm 41, was born in 1980, grew up really in the 90s. And it was still, even though the internet was starting to roll out, culturally speaking, it was pre-internet. Right. Pre-social media, pre-everyone having screens. It was a different time. There's been a huge shift happened going into the 2000s with social media and the prevalence of screens and the ability of people's pride to be built up one way or another. Right? It's very destructive to women. And so what you're talking about right now If you go look at the conservative women on Twitter or Facebook or Gab, wherever, how many of them have a profile shot showing their cleavage, right? So like, what's going on there? Well,
and then if you say anything about it, they'll immediately plug into this weird chivalric feminist fusion, right? Where
right.
they'll say, "How dare you be sexist looking at my cleavage?" And then they'll also say, "Oh, you're not a gentleman." Like, so it's kind of like a lot of these conservative women, they're trying to play it on both ends, and it's almost, in my mind, it's as bad. Certainly, I'm not going to say it's worse than straight up feminism, but it's definitely as bad. I don't really see it as an improvement.
It's fake. It is as bad or worse, right? Because they're putting on they're hypocrites. Really, when you get down, this is what I used to always tell. I used to see lots of women coming out feminists, and the first thing they would do is start wearing dresses and grow their hair out long, right? But they still had the brassy attitude. They still had kind of some careerist impulses. I mean, if they could find the Chad, traditional guy that was like this awesome man, it's everything they want. Like, yeah, they'll stay home and have that guy's babies. But when they were brought into reality of like, no, that's a romance novel. That's an Instagram, like, fake, not real thing. Then a lot of them would end up just going back to the sort of feminist impulses they had. They just dressed up. It was LARPing, right? Live action role playing. They're live action role playing the role of a traditional woman and what they believe it is, right? And I always tell people, like, biblical femininity is not a 1940s, 1950s housewife. That's not what you see. It's not the careerist feminist, but it's not also this these paintings that you see, like these drawings and paintings that they put up as their profile pics or their cover photos or whatever. I'm like, that's not really what it was like. If you've read the stuff, not that it was better than it is now, but their nostalgia for a time that never existed. Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think it's just, I'm in a very happy marriage. I have to start out by saying that I have just a really wonderful wife. I really won the lottery with my wife. I do manage to support her as a stay-at-home mom, but she definitely understands the partnership that we have. So if there's something like she has to take care of something where it involves staying on the phone for 2 hours in the middle of the day, she understands that she's going to do that. She's not going to expect me to somehow fit that in during my work time and then jeopardize my job. But what I see from a lot of these women, even these conservative Christian women, is that they're constantly complaining that their husbands aren't doing more. And I'm wondering, where's the beef here? Where's the stuff that you're doing all day that supposedly means that you're so tired? And there are some Christian men who fall for this, who just think that there's all this mysterious stuff that goes on during the day, during the house while their kids are at school. And somehow that's just so exhausting that, she expects complete submission for you, even when you get off of work after a hard day working 12 hours. I think it's like these microaggressions are so timeless. They go back so far. This is the basic battle of the sexes. And it's almost like the debate about feminism versus sort of conservative femininity. It really hasn't scratched that basic battle of the sexes. What it's done is it's just given women all the ammunition for everything that men and women have always fought about. They have all the ammunition because they can get divorced. Family court will completely side with them. They will get total support from everyone in the church. And that's why, as a pastor, I'm curious what you have to say about this, because I've realized this is why men don't show up to church. Because what they do is, a lot of men, what they are experiencing is they're experiencing a lot of pressure, tons of nagging, even some abusive behavior from their wives at home. And they come to church, and the church always sides with the wife, from what I've seen. Despite everything that Beth Moore says, all of those folks, they're all saying that, it's a patriarchal, misogynistic church. But I do find that church tends to always side with the anti-male criticism. It's always, even when people introduce their wives, they always make self-deprecating jokes, but no one would ever make a self-deprecating joke about a wife, right? It's always...
I do on occasion. I always say to her, I was like, you know how horrible of a person you would have been if you hadn't met me? And she laughs. And I always tell people, I don't have a better half. I have a feminine half, right? I don't think of it that way. What am I saying, that my wife's an idiot when she comes to pick a spouse, right? Like she settled on me. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
No,
right.
we love each other. We compliment each other. We do well. No, there is a base level of misandry that exists in our culture that just gets painted over with Christian verbiage. If you watch, take a guy like Matt Chandler, he's got this talk on YouTube that YouTube recommends, thinks I want to watch, where he says, oh, these guys coming home and they're not tired. You should go to bed exhausted, right? When you come home, you should ask your wife how you can help her and do the dishes and all this stuff. Well, if you listen to it, you're like, yeah, men should be contributing to their household and working their butt off. Life is strenuous and rigorous, and you need to go at it. Like, I agree with that. But if you listen carefully, the presupposition there is that the wife gave up the life of a career to suffer at home. Home is bad. Career is good. You get to go out and enjoy your career while your poor wife, who's so talented, suffers at home. They actually are hating the role of mother and wife and the role of building up the household, right, from within. Well, that's what's going on. They have not changed their mindset. The woman is sacrificing her career, right? So she's still buying into Betty Friedan's feminist mystique lies, right? Still buying in all that, but you've just painted it over with a little bit of complementarian whitewash, and that's what's going on with this. Actually, no, my wife does my wife work hard? Yeah, it's exhausting. Baking, cooking, putting together furniture, educating my kids, doing all that stuff she does. But I'm exhausted. I work 9 hours a day, and then I'm also a pastor, and I do interviews like this. So I finished writing a book. I discipline my kids. I disciple. I do family devotions with my kids Monday through Friday. I do all that sort of stuff. It's a hard life, but we're doing it together. And their problem is they think life happens outside the home. That's what they think. That there's so this all ties back. It really all ties back to women wanting to rule over their husband and wanting to leave their home. You see that in Proverbs chapter 7, that the prostitute, the adulteress, is a woman whose feet doesn't stay at home. But it also ties back to the Industrial Revolution really changing the nature of the household, where the work, the productivity that used to be tied to the house happens outside the house. And that's the thing that we don't need to go back to an agricultural society, but we haven't really recognize the major shifts that have happened in some pretty big ways in the last 250 years, right? The world right now is vastly different from the ancient world, which was pretty consistent for a long time.
Yeah, no, I think that you're onto it really well, which is that it's the husband and wife are talking past each other, but at a certain point, it's almost like the husbands aren't even talking anymore. It's just, they're absorbing all of this criticism constantly from their wife, and the message that they're getting from their wives, from their wives' friends, and even from the men in church is that as the man, he's supposed to just take this, right? This is the blending of feminism and chivalry. You're supposed to just take it and just absorb it all. And that what you're saying that Matt Chandler said, I see this a lot, and I'm starting to become very concerned about this. Because I know a lot of men who are on amlodipine and metoprolol. I'm older than you. I'm about 10 years older than you. So I could tell you what's coming down the line. You get to a point
where Latinos and blacks, man, you guys always look young.
Really?
Our white people, you want to talk about white privileges, we look much older than you all do.
No, but we have, I have the same thing with I take heart pressure medication. I know people who have dropped dead of heart attacks at 57. You can nag a man to death. Okay. There's a way in which if you just inculcate in men, okay, just suck it up and deal and do all this. Don't expect any rest. There are health implications for that. And then also what happens when he all of a sudden just kind of his body breaks down, he gets injured or something like that. And then all of a sudden he can't be there helping all the time. I've seen in many of these marriages, women start finding emotional excuses to get rid of him. She starts saying, oh, well, he's not supporting me. He's not emotionally available. He's not. And I've started to realize that in some of these marriages, it's not even that he's doing anything wrong. She just wants to unload this person because he can no longer provide what he provided before. It took me a while to admit that some women do that, because I never wanted to think that way about women, but there are women who do this. A lot of the things that they complain about, it seems like they're looking for excuses to be able to push out, a man that they no longer see as a provider.
It's bad, man. It's bad. And boomer white knight pastors can't bring themselves to admit it. There's something generational going on there that you can't deny when you start to study the issue and get deep into it. And, look, years from now, my kids are going to point out the sins of our generation, right? I get that.
Right.
I'm not above that, but generations, there was a generation that arose that didn't know the Lord, right? The book of Judges. Generations do have sins that are common to them. And boomers have this tendency to rush to defend women. They bought into that for some reason. I'm not sure why, because they were the generation that saw the sexual revolution happen, but we're the ones that have directly suffered from it. Those of us that was born in the 80s and 90s, and we saw what happened when people forget this. You're old enough to know this, and I'm just barely old enough, but it was not normal to have a lot of divorced children in your elementary school class, people with divorced parents. Not common at all. Even in the 80s. That has become very common now. And we've seen the destruction of the family, which is always a satanic attack, right? You break down, like society is built of households, right? So if you want to destroy society and create chaos and egalitarian sort of way of doing things, which is certainly a Marxist communist goal, you attack the family. You attack the family, you attack the household. You strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter, right? And this is what we're seeing happening right now. Men are under an intense attack, and churches are 60% to 80% female, depending on where you're going. And these guys are catering, I think, in a lot of cases, to their members, these pastors, guys like Matt Chandler or whatever. Chandler's reached out to me. He and I have talked through email, and I think even guys like Chandler are recognizing something's wrong with their men, right? But the thing is, you see these guys and they just say, man up, man up. I get so sick of hearing guys say man up, because the thing is, if you grew up as a bastard, if you grew up as fatherless, most of the young men I meet are like, man, point me in the direction. Tell me what to do, but they need instruction and they need encouragement. And all they're doing, if I can just be frank, is getting pissed on when they go to church. Right? They get these guys that are raining down on them. And I think hey, if you would instruct and encourage these guys, you could have an army of young men that would take up a woman. And then you also have to put the women in their place. You're vain. You need to lie. You need to stop gossiping. Fur babies is an abomination, right? If I'm on an island with my daughter or my dog, I eat my dog day two, right? And it's what are we talking about? It's not that hard of a decision. But these, they need to come at these women just like Scripture does, right? Not I always tell people, I have a lot of people showing up to my church. My church is only 4 months old, but they know me from my kind of online profile. And they'll call me and they'll say, hey, we're going to move to Batavia, Ohio from this state or that state. I'm like, look, I have not planted a church for men. That's not what I didn't set out to plant Masculinity Church, but what I did want to do is plant a church for everybody. And the reality is most men, when they enter in to a church, they enter into Hobby Lobby and they say, you know what? This ain't the place for me. It's like when you're the husband and the woman, you go into Macy's, you go into the women's bra underwear place with your wife, and you're sitting on that little couch. And you're I don't want to be here, right? But I'm here because I love my wife. I'm super uncomfortable. That's most men at churches. They're like, this place is not for me. It's made for somebody else. It's like when I listen to positive and encouraging K-Love, I listen to Christian music, it makes me want to die inside. Who is this for? Well, you dig into it. It's for soccer moms that are middle-aged and just need that. And K-Love's admitted that. They said these are the people we're marketing to. Evangelicalism is a bunch of white knight boomer pastors or guys that continue that legacy, catering to a bunch of like soccer momish wine moms. That's what it is. It is.
Right.
You know, I know that's like a broad stroke, but that's the nature of generalities.
Well, that's what I see. And I mean, we can talk about the problem with the men now too. You know, this is the thing. Churches tend to have men's Bible study, men's breakfast. And I thought, maybe rather foolishly, that would be a place where guys could get a little bit of refuge. But I find actually what they're hearing a lot in those meetings is that man up stuff. And it's often the men are running interference for their wives. You know, it's like it's all about holding other men accountable and telling them, you know, you've got to be up and be an upstanding man and do all this stuff to take. So they're hearing more of the nagging from the men's groups. And part of it is, I mean, obviously we can't, there are men who need to be kicked in the butt sometimes. Obviously, there are men who need to be toughened up. And you know, and as a Generation Xer, I can totally relate to that. But I just think that out of context, without understanding everything else that your church is doing that is making the man feel like this is a hostile place, I don't want to walk in. It does feel like the underwear department at Macy's. You feel like it's a lot of very womanly thing. And I do believe that a lot of the pastors and deacons are marketing things to the women. And I feel like a lot of the Christian writers, other than the ones that I love writing, like I love your stuff, you know, but you know, you're one of those folks that you're I don't think you're marketing to women, but you know, you can't pierce through the noise sometimes because there's this layer of all of these men who have tens of thousands of followers, you know, on Twitter, and they say all the right things to keep women happy, and they're always coming to the defense, and they're trying to look really good. I feel like it's like simping has become the default. Even when men are already married and they don't need to be simping anymore, they're still simping. They're still trying really hard to be patted on the head. Part of it is maybe these men didn't grow up with dads, and so they're constantly in the mode of trying to please mom. That's all that they can do, is they're just trying to please mom, and they wanted to pat her on the head.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what's going on, is that we are a nation of bastards is what we are. We are functional bastards. You go back to the King James Version, Hebrews. If a father, the only person that's not disciplined, that doesn't receive the discipline of a father, is a bastard, is what the King James says, right? Mm-hmm. Fatherless. That's an idea of we lost. It used to be shameful to not carry your father's name because it meant your dad, you weren't part of your dad's legacy. He wasn't handing the baton of masculinity to you, right?
Right.
You were on your own. And a lot of us are on our own. We don't realize how lost we are. For a lot of times we get married and have a son, right? And we're like, oh, I don't know how to be a man. I don't know how to be a dad. And then I know a lot of stories of men having emotional breakdowns when they realize that they're very clueless on it. So we got all these guys out there that grew up without a dad, with a often overcompensated mother, grew up in a overly feminine public school system, that were stuck on Adderall, that were told being aggressive and that it's good to cry, right? Just cry, right? Which is, of course, with men, they need to be taught not to cry unless it's appropriate. Right? Men have to learn a level of stoicism, that not to be totally emotionally unavailable. I cried at the death of my daughter. I cried when the Bengals made it to the playoffs. It was amazing. No, I didn't really do that, but I'm not ashamed of crying, but we're big and strong, much stronger than we can't be emotionally untethered. And so these guys have grown up being told crazy things. And now they're trying to be a man and they don't know how to be a man. Well, some of them just like, tell me I'm a good guy. Tell me I'm a good man. Tell me I'm a nice guy. They're looking for that from women. They're really looking at that from men as well. That's why the gospel is so important, right? The gospel is that through Jesus the Son, our elder brother, we're reconciled to God the Father. And then God the Father, according to Numbers 6, his countenance shines upon us. His face shines on us. Because of the blood of Jesus Christ, we're accepted to God. We have 100% approval because of Jesus. I don't need to work for the approval of men. Now I can rest in the promise of the gospel, and I don't have to be a slave to this. And that's why really, when you get into a lot of the sexuality stuff, you see like it's really fear of man, it's performance driven, it's not gospel driven at all. All these guys out there that say that we're about, cultural Christianity or we're lopsided on patriarchy. Like, do you know our God is God the Father? He's the archetypical God. He's
Right.
not, God is not, fatherhood is not a metaphor that we place on God. Fatherhood is a metaphor that we place on man. You do know that the church has taught this for thousands of years, but they don't, because they're integrated into the culture and they're trying to please people.
Mm-hmm.
But biblical Christianity is so powerful. It's what young men need right now. They need encouragement. I always think about what Elijah needed in Mount Carmel. God saying, there's others. You're not alone. God feeding him and encouraging him. Or Joshua about to enter into the battle. Be strong and courageous. Men need encouragement right now. And they're not getting it from pastors. Pastors are pandering to the easy one. To the women. And that's you can't build a church on the back of women. You just can't do it. And that's why
that's what we have right now, because just of the skewed numbers, because men are checking out, and I don't know how to solve it. I can tell you that in the work that I've done, because I think about my history. I did not grow up with a father in the home. Yeah, I grew up in the gay community, and what's so disheartening to me is I've slowly realized that to be in church today is not that different from growing up in a lesbian home, in terms of both of them shared this innate contempt for male heterosexuality. It's dirty, it's gross. We don't like it. They're nitpicking all of your, if you try to bring a girl home, the kind of like immediate coldness, the idea that they just don't like to see you building a life with females as a man. There's something about it that's just seen as dirty. And I have noticed, as I've gone across the country to churches talking about this issue, that there is a trend of heterosexual boys who come out as trans because they'll get more support from the church community if they're, a horny boy that has now become a girl and is a transgender lesbian, than if they're just a regular boy, who wants to play sport. This is why this whole issue of trans women in women's sports has become a thing as well, because these are just average boys who they want to run track, they want to play football, they want to do all this stuff, and they can't get validation for it unless they have the status of having been feminized, even if it's just paper thin. I mean, they haven't lost their genitalia, and they don't present as a girl. All it is just some weird label that gives them a certain status, and they're still pursuing girls. Oh, is that your daughter?
This is one of them.
Oh, okay.
Go downstairs, girl. I'm live on air. I can't talk right now.
Shelly Martin has a lot to say here. I don't know if you've been looking at her comments, but first of all, she's praising you to high heaven. She's saying women love your stuff.
We have a pretty decent following with women. I think. I think women want strong men, even though sometimes they resent it. But look, I was just telling someone the other day that. So it's like, take homosexuality. Homosexuality, a big part of it is just a guy was never welcome into the world of men, because the world of men's hard to enter into. It's not easy. Yeah. And one of the big ones is that guys test each other, where they'll say things like they'll insult you, right? And when they insult you, what they're trying to figure out is, how will you react? Will you roll over passively, or will you actually stand up for yourself, or will you like overcompensate, right? And you'll become this like really macho dude. Chicks don't, in the long run, like macho dudes, but they want a guy that's strong and has control and focused and all those things. That's what other men respect too. And but that takes a father to welcome you to that world. And I think women are very unhappy right now. We're in the middle of a sex recession. People are having less sex than they've ever had before. The reason is that androgyny kills sex. It's sexual polarity that drives sexual attraction. A man being masculine, a woman being feminine, they get turned on. When they become more androgynous and more similar, it kills sexual attraction. And women are like, where are the men at? Where are the men?
Yeah. Well, no, listen, I was pulled into the ExGay testimonial industry, like I like to call it, where there's all these church groups that want to have people come up and say how they were delivered from homosexuality. And I just got out of it after a while, because I felt like there was something about it that was, it was just reinforcing the feminization, even as you're supposedly trying to fight against it. Because a lot of the guys, I noticed, they didn't show any interest in, okay, let's move on to the next phase of your life. Now you're going to have to date women. That means you're going to have to be strong. You're going to have to compete with other men to go on dates with girls. You know, you're going to have to put up with her complaining and blaming you for things, because now you're no longer gay. Like, leave that behind. But a lot of times the people who do these ex-gay testimonials, they want to stay in this, oh, I'm gay, I've been delivered, but and look at me, look at me, look at me, look at what I went through. And I feel like they get stuck. And so it's almost like all of the church's attention to the ex-gay testimonials, I think, has almost made it worse. I finally gave up because I realized, you know, I was never gay. I've always been a heterosexual man. I was abused. You know what I mean? So I don't even want to be like going around talking about it being sin. It's like, I was cheated by society. Now God has, you know, helped me to correct that. And I
had this ex-gay guy commenting on my Facebook post when I was talking about how men insult each other and we don't mean it, and women compliment each other and they don't mean it. Right? Like, it's the difference between the sexes. He was very offended by that. And he was talking about the abuse he suffered at his father, at the hands of his father and his mother. Actually, he was one of these ex-gay guys that would go around and talk about he used to be ex-gay, get a lot of praise for it, right? And vanity's bad for ex-gay. I mean, like, vanity's very is a huge problem in the gay community. And with this guy, I was just thinking, man, this guy, he just needs a brother that says, stop being a pansy. Right? Yeah. Stop it. Look, you can do it, dude. Stop being a sissy. Like, we think you can handle it, but you're acting kind of like a fairy right now. You know what I mean? Like, you got to like press them hard and like, we're not against you. We're for you, but you're acting like a sissy, like teasing. Man, I got teased so bad and I had to learn to hold my own. It was really awkward because you can't overreact, but because in men, we work covenantally. We work with other men. We work with other men in very difficult situations such as warfare and governance. And we have to be able to like, for example, a good friend of mine, he was really mad. He serves with me actually at my church. He was really mad at a decision I made. And late at night, he's like texting me like, angry text. Well, I'm asleep. I go to bed early and I wake up like 4 a.m. I read it in the morning. I'm like, whoa. And then I text back like, hey, I'm sorry. Let's talk about this. But he was able to be very rough with me. And it's no big deal. Like, I actually want that sort of communication between us. Like, I don't want us to be able to always walk an eggshell because we're dealing with difficult issues. And he apologized to me. I said, well, you're forgiven. But at the same time, I'm glad that this is how we are, that we can work together, that we can be frank with one another. Right. Because we're dealing with big issues. We're pastoring people. We're looking over their souls. And I can't have a guy that can't just be straight up with me. I need to know. And so you see this, like, what gay men need is they need brotherhood and fatherhood, and just say like, stop it with the gay stuff. Stop it with the erotic stuff, right? Like, let's go do it. Let's get it done, man. Let's go conquer the world. Get a woman. You can do it. Don't be scared of women, right? You're made to conquest them.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because that's what I was doing for a while. I was really coaching guys who were coming out of the lifestyle. And I put on my website at one point, I mean, all that stuff's been taken down. I had to take it down for a lot of reasons. But, you know, one of the things that I was trying to tell folks was, it's like, I don't have any interest in running a website for people who want to just get out of homosexuality and then don't want to move on and build a life with the opposite sex. Like, if that's your thing, there are places and ministries you can go to where you kind of become the celibate gay person who talks about that, you know, indefinitely. But I did not want to do that kind of counseling because I don't think it's healthy for guys. I lost the sound. I can't really hear what you're saying. I don't know if it was
I apologize. I was going to say the difference between, I think, you know, Malakoi and arsenokoitai, the difference between effeminate and actual someone that's engaged in sodomy. I think it's just a difference in history and intensity. What all men need is really the same thing. Like with gay guys, like I treat their history different. because they had a different history. I want them to know that I acknowledge your history and I get what you've gone through to the level that I can. But honestly, I'm going to tell you all the same things I would tell a guy that grew up straight without a dad. Like, I don't have anything special here. I don't got, like, you need God the Father. You need to be a man of your word. You need to be a man that wants to overcome, that's not scared of sweat, that's not scared of getting dirty, that man that's not scared of like telling a woman no. I mean, all these men, when I see elders in the neo-Calvinist Reform Gospel Coalition movement, what I see is men that never had the guts to tell the woman, be quiet, right? Like, be quiet, woman, right? Right? The men are talking. Yeah. And that triggers feminists, right? But I'll tell you what, when my wife is talking to me about things related to femininity, she can look at me. She's respectful enough not to say be quiet, but her eyes say be quiet. And I'm like, all right, I'm out of my depth here. I should defer to this woman. This is her area, right? Like, defer to me. These men have never told their wives no. Never. Like, I had these guys, these elders from this one church that wanted to meet with me because people were upset about some of my tweets. And I was like, which people? Right. And they're like, well, we're not at liberty to say. I'm like, are you familiar with what the Bible teaches on this topic? Like, it doesn't work this way. I know. Well, it's just Karens. It's Karens using levers of power to try to silence someone. Yeah. And like, will you stop? And I'm like, I'm not going to stop. And then I'm never going to stop. Like, if they want to talk to me, if I said something that's legitimately offensive and was wrong, I'll repent. I'm not above, I make mistakes. There's things I say that I shouldn't have said. I'm not above correction, but I looked at them and I said, like, you're being their slaves. Don't you understand that at some point you'll be underneath you'll be in the target, and anyway, it's an uphill battle. But the thing that we all should take comfort in, I mean, think of your history and think of my history. Like, I'm poor white trash, Hoosier, Indiana, like, Presbyterian. And what are you? Right. But here we are.
That's the best thing to be, though. Yeah.
Here we are. Like, we need the gospel. We need Jesus. We're not going to participate in his lies. We're not going to bow down to it. We're sick of it. I'm not rolling over. What I want to tell everyone online and everyone at Gospel Coalition is very simple. I'm not sorry. I'm going to keep doing it. You can't cancel me without killing me. Bring it on, right? Like, let's do this. Let's go. Because once we start doing it, other men are going to be like, you know what? I'm willing to go with those guys. I'm willing to take the risk, because our culture is toxic and it is destroying young women and young men. And we cannot stand for it. Those of us who have seen what happens when we are raised up effeminate, I wasn't effeminate in the sense I was more macho. I was the flip side of it, right? Like, I was a very sensitive kid. And then when I got into high school, I started boxing and wrestling and lifting weights and all that stuff to compensate. But it wasn't masculine. It wasn't strength under control per se. But I saw the destruction that wrought in my life. And so I see guys like you, and I have followed your story, or our mutual acquaintance, John Harris, or whatever. There's a lot of people right now that are like, no, I am not your playbook. I'm throwing it out. Like I'm done with this. And I really have a lot of hope for the young generation. I've talked to them. I did 200 hours of counseling last year, 200 hours with just men, divorcees, young men. It was what really informed the writing I did for the book that I'm publishing with Canon Press. Turned in the first draft of the manuscript just 2 days ago. As I talked to those young men, I saw what they're up against and how they're reacting. I'm like, these guys are amazing. They've they're realizing the propaganda of the age. So there's every reason to be optimistic while also measuring the reality of our enemy, which is significant.
Now, is this the best place for people to follow you? It's goodtobeaman.com, and they can find out about the book there?
Yeah, they can go to itsgoodtobeaman.com. I'm super active on Twitter at This Is Foster, THIS, THE, Foster, FOSTER. You'll find me there until I get banned, but right now I'm small enough they don't seem to care. But I'm on It's Good to Be a Man. We have a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, whatever, and we're always just trying to create content that helps men. Sometimes we can be a little energetic in our
Look,
prose.
I have found it. I think it's pitch perfect. You hit just the right tone.
Praise God. We try.
We are in. Yeah. I think God has touched you. His hand, the flame has come down and licked up the water in the trenches, like we saw. I just taught that to young men this morning. Elijah versus the 400 prophets.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
It's good. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I hope that we can stay in touch. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise, Bobby. God bless you. God bless your ministry, man.
Thank you. All right. So God bless you.
All right. Take care.